Comedian Dave Chawner is joining me this morning. I think we've both been a little bit blown away by the two royal stories this morning. The Queen, first up, talking about how you need to think about other people, about getting the jab, if you're wary of getting the jab. She's been saying in an interview with on Zoom with NHS officials in charge of the rollout of the jab, that encouraging those with doubts to think about other people rather than themselves. And because we went a nanosecond without Prince Harry being talked about, what a surprise, he is in the news. Prince Harry has carried out an interview with James Corden on his The Late Late Show, and the pair are interviewed while they tour Los Angeles on an open-air bus in the sun with afternoon tea. And during this interview, Prince Harry has talked about how he stepped back from his royal duties because the British press was toxic and was destroying his mental health. Well, let's have a little bit of a listen of what he actually had to say.
It was never walking away. It was stepping back rather than stepping down.
Right.
It was a really difficult environment, as I think a lot of people saw. We all know what the British press can be like. And it was destroying my mental health. I was
Really?
like, this is toxic.
Yeah.
So I did what any husband and what any father would do, is like, I need to get my family out of here. But we never walked away. And as far as I'm concerned, whatever decisions are made on that side, I will never walk away. I will always be contributing, but my life is public service. So wherever I am in the world, it's going to be the same thing.
Well, his life is public service. Well, let's talk to his biographer, royal biographer, Angela Levin, about this. Angela, his life is public service. He hasn't walked away. I mean, he jetted off to the United States and sold his soul to Netflix, James Corden and Oprah Winfrey. Has he walked away or not?
Well, of course he has. We have to remember that this was recorded before they were stripped of their patronages. So you have to take that into account. But it's an extraordinary interview. Most of it is hilariously funny. I found myself laughing sitting alone in the kitchen.
But what, funny because it was meant to be? I mean, I personally think James Corden's a funny guy, and he does quite a good, funny, lively interview.
The repartee between the two of them was quite extraordinary, very, very fast. So even if it was scripted, it was very funny. We learned a lot about Archie's first words, and that the Queen sent him a waffle maker for Christmas. All sorts of things like that. They went to a house where Harry said, James thought it would be the best one for him to live in. And he rings up Meghan, who looks immaculate.
Surprise.
The hair done and makeup on. And she calls him Has. That's the name she likes to call him. A has-been, maybe, or a...
But the extraordinary thing about this is that, look, he says during this interview that he said that the toxic British press were destroying his mental health. And yet he's moved somewhere where there are far fewer restrictions on what can be written about in intrusions into people's privacy. In the First Amendment rights, people can say pretty much anything they want, and you can't sue. But they talked about privacy, and he wanted to have, protect his family, protect his son, protect his wife, protect his mental health. And here he is talking about the most intimate details of his and his family's life, about, the Queen's gift for him, their nicknames for each other, his personal feelings about his son. I mean, what they actually mean is we want to be able to monetize our privacy rather than have it taken from us by the British press.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And of course, what he seems to have completely forgotten, that when he set up this charity in Africa, Sentabile, which was for orphans whose parents had died of AIDS, the press came along, did a documentary about it, publicized it enormously. Think of Invictus Games. Yeah. It wouldn't be so important unless the press had done it. I think it's ludicrous, and I think that's just him finding an excuse. And of course, he has stepped away. Anybody with any common sense would realize you can't be part of the monarchy when you're over 5,000 miles away in a different time zone. It's just natural. But the other thing, which I found absolutely extraordinary, he said that he preferred The Crown.
The TV series, yeah.
The Netflix TV series, The Crown, than he did being reported by the British press because we're so ghastly.
This is the interesting thing, isn't it? Is actually a lot of the people who hound the royals aren't British press. The British newspapers actually have always been very respectful of royal family rules, and we know that there are battles where tabloid newspapers that should we say behave badly will then be punished. They won't get access and the like. It's actually freelance paparazzi, because every single photograph of these people, because they are celebrities as well as royals, is worth a fortune. You can get one perfect photograph, you can basically retire if you're a paparazzi photographer. But I'm assuming when he talks about this toxic British press, we know he has a lot of anger about how his mother was treated by the media. But we also know that an awful lot of what was in the media about his mother was actually placed by her with the journalists who wrote those stories. It does seem to want it both ways, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, they select what they want. When they left, they said they want to do things their way. They want to run the British monarchy their way. They want to take over, being in competition with the British monarchy. It is absurd. And I think he's convinced himself that they are absolutely right and everybody else who disagrees with them is wrong. But how many of these tell-alls are we going to have? We've got one with James Corden, which is very funny. And next week, we've got one with Oprah Winfrey. These are people who wanted to guard their privacy. And also, they do select the media they want, to take the picture they want, they tell them exactly what they need to say. These are control freaks in the making, or maybe already made.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Always good to talk to you, Angela Levin, royal biographer. Quite an amusing interview, worth a watch. Dave Chorner watching it, but at the end of the day, the hypocrisy is extraordinary. And given that this interview was done, and we know the Oprah Winfrey interview that's going to air next week, both done before the formal announcement and formal agreement on stepping down from the royal family.
Well, I do love that he said he didn't step down, he stepped back, which is equivalent of saying, well, I didn't quit, I got fired. Yeah, I don't really know if it's any better.
Yeah, yes, and also, you're on a bus tour with a celebrity in America while everyone's in lockdown in the UK. The Queen is talking about encouraging people to get the vaccine, and you're bleating on, moaning about your life, because I've got to be honest with you, I just don't think it's going to fly with a lot of the British public.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really do pick up what Angela said. I really hope that Meghan calls him has been. That would be brilliant.
That was harsh, wasn't it? Overnight, he's been played out in America. A candid interview that he's given to the British talk show host James Corden on The Late Late Show on CBS features the pair touring Los Angeles on an open-air bus in the sunshine, enjoying afternoon tea, in which Prince Harry, who of course left the UK to avoid intrusions into his privacy, reveals an awful lot about his private life. He also accused the British press of being toxic and of destroying his mental health. Well, here's what the Prince had to say when he was asked by James Corden why he felt it was necessary to walk away from the royal family.
It was never walking away. It was stepping back rather than stepping down.
Right.
It was a really difficult environment, as I think a lot of people saw. We all know what the British press can be like. And it was destroying my mental health. I was like, this is toxic. I did what any husband and what any father would do.
Well, it was toxic, and we all know what the British press is like. Well, let's talk to a former member of the British press, Charles Rae. He's a former royal editor for The Sun, now royal commentator and author. Good morning to you, Charlie.
Good morning, Julia.
This is, I've used up all of my adjectives. It's just another extraordinary interview from Prince Harry, the man who wanted privacy, who wanted to take his family away from all this intrusion into his private life, yet again intruding into his own private life.
Well, yeah, and it's amazing, isn't it? We wait for a long time for an interview with Prince Harry, and he's like a bus. Aptly, he's on a bus. And a couple come along at this, almost at the same time. Honestly, when I heard this morning, I just held my head in my hands that this guy is blaming the press for him falling out with his family. He fell out with his brother, and he fell out with other members of the royal family because he just felt he couldn't carry on. I'm not responsible, and I'm sure the British press is not responsible for his problems with his mental health. And let's not forget, you had on the news Angela Levin, who was quite rightly made the point that if it hadn't been for the British press, we would never have heard of Centre Valley, the fantastic charity he set up in Africa, And we would never have heard of the Invictus Games, which is a sort of global mega stardom platform for athletes, soldiers who've suffered serious problems. I don't know what this guy is on about half the time.
It's constantly, it's not just sort of self-pitying, it's the me. And it's such a sharp contrast with the Queen. She's on the front page of the papers today, calling on people, praising the rollout of the vaccine at a really difficult time in the country. I mean, look, okay, yes, I imagine doing lockdown in a very large palace with servants and things is rather easier than it is for most people living in a tower block. Who are we kidding? She has had a privileged life, but she's got her husband, 99 in hospital. Obviously, that's a concern. She, given her age at 94, obviously health concerns for herself as well. But she's talking about people thinking about people other than themselves. And there he is, sitting in the sunshine with his multi-million-pound lifestyle in the United States, going, me, poor me, poor me. I mean, it is exactly the opposite of everything the Queen has ever stood for. Never explain, but also never complain.
It is. You're absolutely correct. And again, let's not forget as well that Harry was lauded in this country for his service, and quite rightly so, for his service for his country in war zones. I mean, it's not something that very many people would adapt to. Lauded for it. He was lauded for all sorts of other things. And when he met Meghan, he was lauded again, who bringing this fresh lady into the royal family.
Everyone was thrilled when we're told constantly that everyone's horrible and racist, and they didn't like her because she was mixed race. I mean, for a start, I didn't realise she was mixed race. I've been watching her on Suits for years. It's totally irrelevant. I was delighted that this clearly troubled young man had found someone he was in love with, and and I just thought, wonderful, how lovely. I watched the wedding. I'm a girl. I love a good wedding. She looked gorgeous. It was lovely. Prince Charles walking with her mum down the aisle. Absolutely lovely. Wonderful. Let's move on with our lives. And ever since that moment, they've done nothing but moan.
And I would say that Meghan Markle had a far better introduction into the royal family than Princess Diana and Fergie had when they first joined the royal family. They were practically treated as outcasts. This was not the case with Meghan. No. And also with Prince Harry, you've also got to remember, the only times this lad's been ever really criticised is when he wore a Nazi uniform to a party, who took a few puffs of a spliff somewhere, and he thumped a photographer while he was drunk. I mean, apart from that, he's had a pretty good press, this guy.
But this is interesting. Why then does he talk about the British press being toxic and how it's destroyed his mental health? I mean, we know there's a lot of anger still about how his mother was treated, and she was hounded. But it wasn't largely by the British press. It was by foreign paparazzi, largely, who were doing it. The long lens photos of Kate Middleton, of a topless something. That wasn't by the British press. That would not pass muster here in the UK at all. No. Those pictures weren't used. I mean, also we know that an awful lot of the stuff that was written about his mother while she was alive was actually given to the newspapers by her.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely right. And it is quite incredible that Harry's gone on this tack. And, the press themselves, have, I think, get blamed for everything. You bring up any politician, any showbiz star who falls foul of, their private life or whatever, or member of royalty. Guess who gets allegedly the kicking? Well, his grandmother's on the front pages today for all sorts of great reasons. Well, I can assure you, Harry's going to be on the front pages tomorrow for all sorts of wrong reasons.
But it's also particularly different when so much of the world is really suffering from lockdowns of the pandemic, and the British people who he claims he wants to serve and be an asset to are really struggling financially, many of them, and struggling with mental health, serious mental health problems. We've spoken to someone in the last hour, losing his father, not being able to grieve him, not being able to see his family during lockdown. And there's Harry on a bus having a lovely interview in the sunshine, living in his multi-million-pound home with his wife and son and another baby on the way. When he talks about service, he says, "I did not walk away." He said, "We never walked away. As far as I'm concerned, what decisions are made on that side, I will never walk away. I'll always be contributing. My life is public service, so wherever I am in the world, it is going to be the same thing." Now, realistically, you're doing interviews with James Corden and with Oprah Winfrey. they will have been paid for those interviews. You do multi-million-pound deals with Netflix, and you give away all your private, intimate details. And he was chatting on a video phone with Meghan. She's calling him by his nickname Has. I mean, this is intimate, private stuff. You can't claim you're doing this out of public service when you're being paid to do an interview that's all me, me, me.
And remember, this is the couple who escaped, and I use that word in quotes, who escaped to Canada because they wanted more privacy. Well, they're never off the front pages with the various things that they're doing, the various interviews that they're doing. I have got no objections in Harry and Meghan making money. They're no longer a burden on the British taxpayer or Prince Charles, who was funding them for up to £2 million in 1 year, but that's gone now. So they're quite right to make their own money, and the best of luck to them. But when you start taking money out of Netflix, which it brings out the Crown and shows the royal family not in a great light, to be perfectly honest, he's certainly just considering all himself all the time. He and Meghan, as you quite right to say, it's just me. Just. And so the rest of you.
Well, indeed. I mean, just finally, I mean, look, you were at the Sun. I mean, we go back a long way. I mean, years and years back on doorsteps, whether it was royal occasions or celebrity occasions or whatever, many, many years back. You've been following the royal families for many, many years. I know you've got a lot of love for the harder working royal members of the family. But they feature, they sell newspapers. There's no doubt. But you're also very aware of what Sun readers over the years have thought of the royals. I mean, look, even me, I'm a Republican, but I think the Queen's done a grand job. Utmost respect. She's absolutely does the right thing. Whatever the scenario, she does the right thing. No question at all about that. Do you think that this sort of thing, even though he's now out, he's in succession to the throne, but only a terrible disaster befalls Prince William's family, God forbid. But he is now out on the outside. Do you think he's still going to damage the future role and the future respect for the royal family simply by the fact that he is still a royal prince?
No, I don't actually. I mean, look, the monarchy has survived thousands and thousands of years, and it's survived all sorts of, much worse controversies. And remember a time when they were being executed and everything else. We have something like that. I mean, I think it's Harry's very fortunate he's not been taken to the Tower. But I think he may put a few dents in the royal family, but they will survive. They will carry on as normal and do what they do. And just forget about Harry for a second and just think about the things that the Queen has been saying about the pandemic. Yeah. And she really has, the idea of what the people want, and she gives it to them. And it's rare for her to come out and say the sort of things that she was saying yesterday. Yeah.
But again, I mean, just think of the faux pas of there's the Queen all over the front pages, going to be all over the news this morning, and it immediately moves on because it's all about Harry, and that is not going to go down well, is it? Charles Rae, so good to talk to you, former royal editor of The Sun, now royal commentator and author.